Okay, good morning, everyone. Everyone, welcome to welcome to Friday. Um, it seems that some people have decided that they wanted a long weekend, and so they're not here when they should be. But you can't just take a long weekend whenever you want, because if you could, I wouldn't be here. But I'm here, and therefore you should be too. But Avatej is here, so good morning to you. Um, let's let's start, right? Um, so on yesterday on Thursday, we were talking about the Roaring Twenties, right? And again, they're kind of roaring for a number of reasons, right? And I think yesterday we talked about it was roaring because of like industrial production, right? The market was going, people were manufacturing and buying and selling, and so it was a really kind of economically active time. But it was also roaring because of what was happening socially, right? And so I think we saw some of that in the documentary yesterday. People drinking and dancing and playing jazz and things like that, and it was roaring for that reason too, right? It was a lots of partying going on. We read a little section of the text yesterday, and I know I assigned you questions from that, but I didn't really like the questions that they asked. Sometimes I feel that with the textbook we have, they wrote it and then they updated some of the sections, but they didn't update the questions. So some of the questions like aren't really good for the thing that you read, or sometimes they ask questions that they never really answered in the text. So I think they did some editing, but they only went halfway. But either way. Um, so we said that the 20s, a lot is kind of happening with regard to consumer stuff and technology, right? And of course, we're very used to a consumer economy today. A lot of the stuff we buy is, we can probably admit it's not stuff that we need, it's stuff that we kind of want, right? And that's where a lot of money comes from. But that starts here in the 20s. Before the 1920s, there just weren't that many things to want, right? There was, your life was more basic. The products that you could buy were mostly things that you needed. But in the 20s, a lot more things are getting manufactured that people just kind of want, right? They're kind of luxury items, or they're items that, are meant to kind of save labor, right? Or save effort. And so we read about that in the textbook when we talked about the British home front, right? People were buying pianos because they could now afford them, and record players because they could afford them. And that continues into the 1920s, right? With radios and vacuum cleaners and washing machines and the first mass-produced cars, and all these things are kind of showing up. And because industrial production has made them cheaper, and because wages are a little bit higher, they're able to kind of buy these things, right? And it's, probably quite exciting for people for their standard of living to go up, right? To have a vacuum cleaner and a washing machine and a car, right? When their parents wouldn't have dreamed of owning such things, right? But they were living in a futuristic time, the 1920s. So yeah, I said there's lots of media going around. Magazines become popular in this period. Magazines weren't really much of a thing before the 20s, but magazines are popular. Advertising gets started here, right? The more products that are on the market, the more you have to try and sell them to people, or you have to compete with other people who make the same thing. And so here we see the very first ads, sometimes for oats, sometimes for cigarettes, right? Which doctors were still recommending to you in 1920. You won't find many doctors recommending cigarettes to you today, but in the 1920s, it was okay. Yeah, mass production here, and so here's a picture of Henry Ford's automotive factory, where they're using an assembly line, right? So The cars kind of move down the line and people just do one thing at a time, right? And so this speeds up production. And I think, what did they say in the movie yesterday, that they were able to produce a car every 2 hours? Don't remember that? I think they said that. I think they were able to, a car was kind of, a brand new car was rolling out the door every 2 hours, which is pretty good for 1920, right? And certainly way faster than they could have produced anything before. We said credit shows up here. Credit was not a thing before, right? If you wanted something, you had to save your money for it. And then when you saved enough, then you could buy it. But here, people start to extend credit, right? And again, some people initially are a little bit not sure about it, but I think lots of younger people are probably more interested in it, right? Because they can get the thing they want today, and they'll pay for it later, right? And it's much more attractive to get the thing that you want right now and then pay for it later, right? Which can be dangerous, but yeah, people start doing that. And look at the number of cars sold here, right? From 1910, 40,000 cars a year to over 500,000, right? And that's GM, right? So Ford was probably selling more cars in this period than GM was. So lots of people are buying cars, right? And at a time when most of the rest of the world doesn't have these things, right? They don't have these luxuries. Right, so we started watching this video. Maybe I'll ask you, Regina, and online people, if you want to use the live chat here and type in some stuff, what kind of social or cultural changes were happening in the 1920s that we saw in the video yesterday?
How they like dress, and
Yeah.
then how they went to like this, because alcohol is bad, so they made like, I remember it's a bar or something that uses passcode.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, not just women, go back.
Yeah.
But women started going back to when they started smoking.
Yeah.
And they have, well, short hair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's one of them.
yeah, so a lot of things have changed for women, right? They've been working men's jobs during the war for a few years, and yeah, they've got a lot more kind of social freedom than they had before, right? And so they're cutting their hair short, they're wearing more fashionable things, shorter skirts, dancing around, smoking, drinking, right? And like prior to this time, like that was like scandal, right? Maybe prostitutes behaved that way, maybe prior to the 1920s. But here, you know, social restrictions relaxed during the war, people get a little more loose about things, and yeah, they're having a good time, and women kind of use their newfound freedom to express themselves, right? And to drink if they want to, smoke if they want to, dance. And they say, you know, that, you know, smoking is almost like more of a symbol of freedom, right? Look how free I am now that I can just do this, right? And so I'm sure maybe they enjoy it or maybe they don't, but it's a symbol of freedom, right? Yeah. So lots of things have changed for women, for sure. We saw those bars, right? They call them speakeasies, which after a few drinks, it becomes very easy to speak. Some people don't stop talking when they start drinking, and like you said, they're kind of password protected. So if you don't know, you know, if people don't know you or don't know that you're cool, you're not getting in, right? Because they don't want to let in the police. And I don't quite understand how the law worked at the time, that the police couldn't just knock on the door and enter, or just get a warrant for it. I don't know how it worked, but either way, even though alcohol was illegal, people seemed to be drinking it all over the place, right? Either in bars or even making it in their home, right? We saw those little bricks of grapes.
Yeah.
Remember the commercial? My father uses it to make grape juice. Wink. So clearly not grape juice, right? So yeah, it was, alcohol was illegal, but people were getting around the rules and kind of having a good time anyway. There was more social or cultural changes. Do you remember any? Definitely women.
I don't remember, but I think after the Great Depression, I don't know if they went back in the video.
Say that again?
I don't know if they already went through it in the
O-
video, but
okay.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, from the meeting,
Yeah.
after the Great Depression happened, I think the person who was elected or something is a woman.
Oh.
Is it?
Yeah, so women do gain the right to vote, and I think the right to run for office around this time, right? Or at least white women do, not all women. So yeah, women start to participate in politics for sure, and I'm not too familiar with how that works. Like I know more about how it goes in Canada. And so in Canada, like women are allowed to vote. Some women are allowed to vote around the First World War, and then some run for office, and some are judges, and so there are women in the political area. So I guess that's that's a social or a political change, but yeah, for sure that happens. They mentioned too Henry Ford. Henry Ford sets a 5-day work week, right? Before this time, work weeks were 6 days a week, and probably like 10 or 12 hours a day, which sounds no, right? Yeah, and so Henry Ford was like, no, we're going to give these people 2 days off, right? 5-day weekend, and he paid them enough so that they could buy their own cars, right? Buy their own, which is a smart business move, right? And so they showed in the film that people had leisure time now, right? They could get in their car and they could drive outside the city and maybe go camping or have a picnic or go fishing, right? They had kind of free time, right? And that was, I know this is hard to imagine, right? Because we kind of take for granted our free time, but yeah, these people didn't really have as much free time unless you were a rich person, right? A wealthy. Then you just kind of worked as much as you felt like it. But the people who were working in factories worked long, hard hours, and they didn't have a lot of time or energy to, go on vacation or just have a weekend away, right? But now people have a little more money. They have a way of getting out of the city and going somewhere. And so, yeah, regular people start to have leisure time, right? They have the weekend to do what they want, right? And again, that's good for business too, right? Because then people can drive outside the city, right? They can stay in a little hotel or a bed and breakfast. They can go out for breakfasts or lunch or dinner, right? They can go to a movie, right? They can do all sorts of things that, they can spend their money on fun things. But that's good for the economy too, right? Because then people who run hotels and bed and breakfasts and restaurants, they all benefit as well. So there's kind of this, people are given leisure time and some spare money, and that kind of feeds business, right? Because people want to spend money on their day off, right? Go shopping, go to a restaurant, go for coffee, go to a movie, the same things we kind of do today, right? What about communication and transportation? What do you see? Yeah.
Cars already invented, right? But
Yeah.
I think it was
They were more available, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so cars existed before the 1920s, but again, only really the rich had them. But now everybody's starting to buy a car, right? What effect do you think that has on cities?
You can see more cars in the cities.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you have to find a place for them, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, like roads before would have been quite, and you see this in really old cities, right? Their streets are really narrow.
Oh.
Yeah. And then, but modern cities with cars, they need more space, right? You need maybe a couple of lanes on either side, and then you need a place to park all these cars, right? They're selling hundreds of thousands of cars. They've all got to be parked somewhere, right? In a parking lot or, alongside the sidewalk or something. And that kind of changes how cities are designed, right? And again, if you go to a really old city, you'll find that the streets are incredibly narrow. I remember driving through one in northern Scotland, so it was an older city, driving through, and the it felt like the mirrors were like dragging on the walls because it was so narrow, like there wasn't room for anything else, and it was just like you were just weaving your way through. And so, yeah, the entire kind of design of cities has to change, right? Because now you need space for all of these cars, right? You need traffic lights, right? You need to educate people about traffic safety. Initially, lots of people get run over by cars because they're just not used to looking for them, right? They're not, nowadays none of us would step out onto the street without looking, right? Because we know about cars, but at the time people weren't used to them and would often, get run over. Let's see. This didn't come up in the video, but I'll throw it in. Air travel starts to become a thing. Oh no, we will see it in the video. Air travel will come up, but we'll wait on that. And I think the radio will come up too, but we'll see that. So maybe what we need to do is get back to the video because what's that? Yeah, we definitely didn't. So did we watch 15 minutes yesterday? Does that sound right? I think it was 15. Okay. So maybe what we'll do then is I think we should just watch the rest. It's not long. It's probably got about half an hour left. So we'll watch the rest, we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and kind of talk about what we've seen, okay? So for online people, the link is in Microsoft Teams, as are these two questions. And so we'll start at 15 minutes. I'm going to put it here. Oops. Put it in here just to confirm. We'll watch 15 minutes all the way to the end. Then we'll take a break. Then we'll come back and talk. Okay? So online people, we'll see you in just a little bit. Okay?
Americans have never had it so good. But while the flappers celebrate their social revolution, other Americans are reacting to change in a very different way. In the rural South, a dark force is rising, and a dormant volcano is about to explode. It's 1923, and America is on the upswing. Well-paid jobs abound as industry thrives and a largely unregulated stock market booms. Then, in August, President Harding dies suddenly from a heart attack. His successor, Calvin Coolidge, carries the torch of small government and big business.
One of the greatest favors that can be bestowed on the American people is economy in government.
Silent Cal famously says, "The chief business of the American people is business." For most Americans, the future is bright. But the country's political, social, and economic institutions strongly favor white citizens over people of color. Nowhere is it worse than for blacks living in the Jim Crow South. Many live and work in tough, segregated conditions. As these rare recordings show, the work songs have changed little since the time of slavery. In South Carolina, they lay the tracks for America's railways. And in Port Norris, New Jersey, they shuck oysters for wealthy diners. Some African-American communities are prospering, like the residents of Greenwood, a suburb of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Here, former slaves were given land after the Civil War, and this rare footage shows the thriving town they built. A remarkable Baptist pastor named Solomon Sir Jones is the pioneering filmmaker. His footage was lost for more than 50 years. Jones captures the bustling life of Greenwood, which could be any American small town. But Tulsa's whites don't like what they see. In May 1921, after a black man is accused of assaulting a white woman, a white mob rampages through the city. For a night and a day, they loot and burn Greenwood. A Fox News crew captures the only surviving footage. It is the bloodiest racial massacre in American history, leaving nearly 300 dead. Behind the violence is a terrifying force, born in the 19th century, but until now, silent. The second wave of the Ku Klux Klan. News photographers capture a Klan march in Tulsa 1 year after the riots. The Klan appeals to white Americans who feel threatened by the fast pace of change in the 20s. Born in the South, the KKK spreads north. Its members promote what they call 100% Americanism, targeting not just blacks, but Catholics, Jews, immigrants. At the height of its power, newsreels capture 40,000 Klansmen and women massing in support of white supremacy on the streets of Washington, D.C. By 1924, its membership reaches a staggering 4 million. The KKK will remain a force of bigotry in this country for generations to come. Racial tensions in the South and bountiful jobs in the North prompt many African Americans to uproot their families. Nearly 1.6 million people choose to move in what becomes known as the Great Migration. It transforms neighborhoods, like New York's Harlem. Black Americans bring their culture and music with them: blues, jazz. Not for the last time, black music is adopted by white America. In one of the earliest recordings of an all-white jazz band, Ben Burney and his orchestra play their 1925 hit, Sweet Georgia Brown. Jazz finds a new home in the raucous speakeasies and nightclubs of the cosmopolitan cities. A flamboyant former actress named Texas Guinan runs New York's 300 Club, often greeting her customers with, "Hello, suckers."
Before I start to sing this song, I want it understood that no sucker in this room has been a mention how it works.
Black music, illegal booze, and liberated women make her a fortune.
What's the greatest country in the whole world?
At Guinan's 300 Club, the Roaring Twenties reach a colorful crescendo. Parts of the United States are evolving faster than ever before. In the middle of the decade, a new technology will unite the country and create new heroes. As 1925 begins, prosperity and new inventions revolutionize everyday life in America. Modern conveniences we now take for granted appear for the first time. Vacuum cleaners replace carpet beaters. Electric refrigerators, ovens, and washing machines save hours of work. But the invention that brings the whole country together is radio. This is Radio Row, New York City's Cortlandt Street, the world's largest collection of electronic stores. It will remain this way until 1966, when it's leveled to make way for the World Trade Center. Shop after shop competes by selling different models. And here, actual sounds of street crowds listening to a radio broadcast. Advertisers quickly see new and exciting ways to reach a massive audience. On Christmas Eve, 1926, Wheaties airs the first commercial jingle. And the cereal becomes the most popular in America. It's branded the Breakfast of Champions, and soon features prominent sports figures on each box.
The best breakfast food in the land.
For the first time, Americans can listen to sports events as they happen, anywhere in the country. Especially the national pastime, baseball. Players quickly become American heroes. None is bigger than Babe Ruth. No radio recordings of games exist, and this footage is rare. Ruth starts his career as a pitcher, but soon evolves into the greatest slugger the game has ever seen. In 1920, his first season with the Yankees, he leads the league with 54 home runs. The next highest total is 19.
Hello, honey. How'd you like that one?
He and his wife, Claire, are a glamorous power couple.
Well, I'm going out now and try to make another one for you. All right, darling.
He sets one of the game's greatest records in September of 1927 by hitting 60 home runs in a single season. And the Yankees reward him with a contract for $80,000 per year, an astronomical amount at that time. By 1926, 5 million homes own a radio, a staggering increase on the 2,000 homes at the start of the decade. Just in time for one of the century's greatest sporting controversies. Boxer Jack Dempsey has won 66 bouts over 13 years. Born in poverty in Colorado, Dempsey has Irish, Cherokee, and Jewish ancestry. He's a strong, offensive fighter, making it to the top through skill and guts. His 1921 victory over French boxer Georges Carpentier is the first $1 million match. It turns him into a national star.
Of announcer Joe Humphreys died away. The Argentinian and the champion staged the most savage slugfest ever witnessed.
Dempsey doesn't believe in defense. Relentless attack is his style.
Murderous right, cruel left hook crashed on Firpo's body and jaw. Dempsey's pile-driving fist battered him to the canvas time and again.
The public loves it, and him.
He was up, down again.
In 1926, he fights Gene Tunney, a former U.S. Marine with 64 wins under his belt. Tunney shocks Dempsey and the nation with his victory. A year later, in 1927, 50 million Americans tune into the rematch in Chicago. This is the radio commentary they heard.
They're coming together. This is the 7th round. They're up. Dempsey came into Tunney. Both of them shot
Dempsey
both
is in
hands.
black
Nobody
shorts
did
with a
any
red
damage
trim.
as they came out. Tunney's right.
In the 7th round,
Dempsey's
he
face.
floors
He
Tunney.
lands the right. And Dempsey comes back. And Tunney is down. Tunney is down. From the right, left, and right to the face.
He's supposed to go to a neutral corner before the 10-second count can begin.
On the other side,
But he doesn't move for 4 crucial seconds.
and now they're at it again.
It buys Tunney extra time. He's down for a full 13 seconds before getting up.
Out left and right to the face.
He becomes known as the long count.
On the other side, 8-8. 9. And 20 is up. And now they're at it again. 20.
The fight continues, and Tunney wins on points, despite being down longer than the allowed count of 10.
Over. It's all out, and Dempsey is practically
Ignoring a press storm, Dempsey accepts the decision gracefully.
no question now.
His attitude in defeat is applauded and made famous by the radio. He retires at age 33, a wealthy, popular symbol of the American dream. World-beating sports stars, technological innovation, and a booming economy. By the mid-1920s, the country is brimming with confidence. But nature is about to deliver a shattering blow to one of its greatest success stories. It's 1926, and Miami's economy is soaring, fueled by northerners attracted to its tropical climate and pristine beaches. Through the decade, the population grows from 30,000 to over 100,000 residents. Its blue skies, crystal waters, and swaying palm trees make it the winter party destination for the wealthy. On September 17th, sun worshippers have no idea that a devastating hurricane is sweeping their way. That night, a 60-mile-wide Category 4 hurricane smashes into the city. Nearly 400 people are killed, and 43,000 left homeless. News cameraman Ralph Earl is trapped for 6 hours, capturing these images of Miami underwater. It is, perhaps, the earliest known storm chasing footage. Earl, on the left, flies his shocking footage himself to be distributed to the 20,000 movie theaters across the country. The rebuilding cost reaches $109 million, $165 billion today. Worse even than Hurricane Katrina. The University of Miami had just opened a year earlier and christened its teams the Hurricanes. As Miami rebuilds, 1,000 miles to the north, one man sets out to prove that the nation's spirit is unbroken. This is 24-year-old Charles Lindbergh in 1926, the aviator's earliest known film footage. He's just a year out of Army flight training school and already dreaming of making history. Lindbergh wants to win a $25,000 prize for the first solo non-stop flight from New York to Paris. At stake is the future of air travel. Transatlantic ocean liners are safe and reliable, but slow. Planes are considered too dangerous. 6 pilots have already died attempting the 3,600-mile crossing. Long Island, May 20th, 1927. Lindbergh readies the Spirit of St. Louis, his $10,000 custom-built monoplane. 500 spectators have gathered to see him off. On board, he's packed 5 ham sandwiches to keep him going. At 7:52 a.m., he's off. And after a few bounces, aloft, just barely clearing telephone lines. He will be in the air for 33.5 hours. No radio and only a compass. The press dub him the Flying Fool. At 10:24 p.m. in Paris, tens of thousands witness his triumphant night landing. Instantly, 25-year-old pilot, now dubbed Lucky Lindy, becomes the most famous American in the world. President Coolidge orders the USS Memphis to bring him back to New York in style. Four million people line Fifth Avenue for a ticker-tape parade. He epitomizes the nation, young, handsome, and brave. And his daring feat proves that flight is the future of travel. Congress awards Lindbergh the Medal of Honor. And the following year, he becomes Time magazine's first ever Man of the Year. For 3 months, he tours the country, visiting every state. 1 in 4 Americans sees Lindy on his Guggenheim tour. The Heinz family from Portland, Maine, is among them. On July 24th, they capture Lindbergh's arrival in Portland in a home movie. The Heinz have profited from creating a successful hand cream business. A new generation of women wanting their product and the power of mass production has made them and others rich and utterly transformed America. There are now 20 million cars crowding into American cities. Accidents become common, as pedestrians have to learn to watch out for cars, and vice versa. There's no such thing as a driver's test. Faced with this new threat to public safety, authorities turn to innovation, like the traffic light, as seen here on New York's Fifth Avenue. Soon, traffic cops and stop signs begin to appear throughout the country. Still, fatalities increase from 12,000 in 1920 to over 30,000 by the end of the decade. Education campaigns try to highlight the dangers by putting totaled cars on display, some even shaming the drivers. In Portland, Maine, the Heinz family shares in the national tragedy. Their son, William, is seen here in home movie footage at age 5 in 1924. A year later, a Ford Model T strikes and kills him on Vaughn Street. He's the 4th boy in the area to be struck by a car within 24 hours. But car culture isn't the only trend shaping the country. A soaring economy has construction reaching for the sky. In Manhattan, a series of ambitious skyscrapers rise up, each competing to claim the title of tallest in the world. The Chrysler Building becomes the first man-made structure to breach 1,000 feet. It's a leading example of Art Deco architecture that remains iconic to this day. This is rare footage of its famous eagles being installed on the 61st floor. Like the Statue of Liberty, they're thinner than they seem. The working men who construct the buildings, known as roughnecks, are a special breed.
Okay, let the eagles scream. Pretty high up there.
They work without harnesses, safety ropes, or hard hats, spending 8-hour shifts in the clouds with no bathroom breaks. Workers fling red-hot rivets by hand through the air. These jobs are so dangerous that 2 out of 5 fall to their deaths or end up disabled. Across town on 34th Street, construction begins on an enormous 102-floor office building, intended to be a symbol of New York's wealth and power. Former New York Governor Al Smith actively promotes the construction.
As fast as human ingenuity, brains, and ability can bring it about, there will tower on this corner the Empire State Incorporated, the largest office building in the world.
But the boom is a bubble about to burst. Nearly 80% of goods are bought on credit. Most Americans have no savings at all. Consumers are stretching themselves thin. And with a runaway bull market, few realize what's about to come. The skyscrapers crown a hollow economy that is about to spin dangerously out of control. In 1927, much of America looks like smooth sailing. Like the mighty Mississippi, the country seems to be flowing toward a prosperous future. For generations, Americans have built their livelihoods along their longest river, stretching more than 2,300 miles from northern Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. The river offers jobs, food, and a distinctive way of life, all protected by a system of levees that aim to control the river's flow. But nature is about to show the limits of human intervention. 8 months of extreme rainfall swell the river to unprecedented levels. Then, on April 21st, the waters burst through the levees. The devastation is staggering. An area the size of New England, over 70,000 square miles, is underwater. 1,000 are dead, mostly black families. 700,000 are homeless, and there are more than $1 billion in damages. This is the U.S. Army Signal Corps footage of the aftermath. In all, 10 states are affected, with a fifth of Arkansas underwater. Nevertheless, President Coolidge refuses to commit federal money to help. He believes disaster relief is the job of charities and private business, not government. Temporary camps are set up in the disaster zone. But many opt to migrate north rather than to stay and try to rebuild. The Great Mississippi Flood serves as a warning of how fast fortunes can change. But for much of the country, the good times keep rolling along. Wall Street is booming. Trading volumes are so high that in 1928, the New York Stock Exchange introduces tickers that can print 500 characters a minute, twice as fast as before. Millions of investors are out to get rich quick, often by borrowing money and buying on margin. For the first time, Americans can buy now and pay later. But the market gains are driven by optimism, not on the strength of the companies. Few worry. As long as there are buyers, it seems like a license to print money. By September 1929, the Dow Jones has tripled since 1924. It seems like the bull market will last forever. What most investors don't know is there are too many goods to sell. Total car sales have dropped 30%. In Detroit, unsold cars pile up in scrapyards. At the sound of the opening bell on Thursday, October the 24th, 1929, there are no buyers, only sellers. The market falls by 11%. In 2 hours, $9 billion is lost. Terrified banks recall payment from traders who have borrowed money. Most can't pay, leaving the banks in crisis. On Tuesday, the 29th, the New York Stock Exchange goes into a total spiral. Brokers beg to sell at any price. It comes to be known as Black Tuesday. $25 billion evaporate almost overnight. This isn't just about Wall Street. Banks will shut down all across the country. $140 billion in savings will disappear. Ordinary people are ruined. Assistant Secretary of Commerce Julius Klein reaches out through radio to restore calm.
And regardless of regrettable stock market gyrations, the position of commerce and industry throughout the country is fundamentally sound.
He's wrong. After the Roaring '20s, Americans will come to know their next chapter as the Great Depression. It's a defining time for a young nation, and she will revive. But the future will not be easy. When the giant Empire State Building opens the following year, it has few tenants.
We are about to officially open the Empire State Building, the largest and most beautiful office building in the world.
It stands lifeless, mocked as the empty State Building. It will take 2 full decades until 1950 before it turns a profit. America's 10-year party has led to a hangover affecting millions. It's the greatest boom to bust in history.
Okay, we are officially back. So, again, in that, probably more in that half of the documentary or that part, there was a lot of stuff that was kind of, good for, I guess, interesting for American history, but not really so much for world history. The floods in the Mississippi, big deal for the US, but world history, it's not really a thing, right? They spent a lot of time on boxing, and baseball, which are big deals in the United States, but most of the world doesn't care about that stuff, right? So there are some things that were significant for American history, but there are some important things for world history too. So communication technology, what did we see there? Yeah. We definitely saw radios, right? And why do you think radio was a big deal? It was a huge deal. Why do you think it was so important?
It's for people to communicate with each other and connects the people throughout the world, throughout the country.
Right? Connects people throughout the country, right? Gives them an ability to communicate with each other, right? What's that? Entertainment? Yeah, it's an informative thing, right? People get information from it. It's also entertainment, right? And so there's these radio shows that are kind of, imagine a television show but close your eyes, right? And that's what a radio show is. And to us, it doesn't sound very satisfying, but for audiences of the time, yeah, people would, have their dinner, right, with their family, and then they'd all gather around the radio in the living room, right? And of course, there was nothing to look at really, but they'd listen to shows together, right? And there were kind of like action adventure spy shows, and there were comedy shows, and there were musical shows where you could hear people performing, and comedy, and then there was the news, and yeah, it was all the things that we, could watch on TV now, or I guess could watch on our phones now. But that was available to people for the first time, right? Also think about the fact about time-wise, right? The ability of radio to reach everyone instantly, right, at the same time, right? That was an important thing, right? Especially with those baseball games, right? Before, if you wanted to know who won the baseball game, you'd have to wait until the next day when they put it in the paper, and then you could read about it, which is kind of not that exciting, right? And not many people could actually go to the games, right? But with radio broadcasts now, thousands and thousands of people can't see it, but they can know what's happening as it's happening, right? Very exciting, right? To actually be able to, it's not quite like you're there, but it's as close as you're going to get in the 1920s. So radio has the ability to kind of, to connect people, to allow them to communicate, but also to have them experience something all at the same time, right? And that's an important thing too, right? And it's hard to describe, but there is something significant about a bunch of humans experiencing the same thing at the same moment, right? There's some kind of like powerful thing, right? You guys have been to like a concert, like a music show of some sort? Yeah. There's something exciting happening there, right? When everybody is kind of experiencing and taking in the same thing at the same time, right? There's something like almost electric about it, if you will, right? And you have to think like for people in the 20s, even though, like, do you guys ever listen to the radio? Maybe in the car? Yeah. People don't really listen to radio quite that much anymore. But in the 1920s, like, it would have been that same thing, right? People would have been gathered around their radios, and they'd be listening to a show, or maybe they'd be listening to an address from the president, right? Maybe the president was telling people the State of the Union, and it was like, okay, we're hearing this, but everyone else in the country is hearing it at the same time, right? And so, yeah, it kind of pulls people together, right? Suddenly people are, experiencing some of the same things. It's like that feeling when, like you're watching a series on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and you ask someone else if they're watching it, and they're like, oh my God, I love that show, right? And then you feel like you have that kind of like, you have something you share with them, right? It's a little relationship. It's like, oh yeah. And then you can talk about it with them. And radio does the same thing, right? It gives people the ability to say, oh, did you listen to, The Shadow last night? And like, yeah, it was great, wasn't it? And then, yeah, it kind of builds community, right? It binds people together. Also, think about the fact that people could get information even if they couldn't read, right? And again, literacy in the United States, well, it's probably fallen, but literacy in the United States is probably close to 100%, right? The same as it is in Canada, probably 98%. But in 1920, it's not. Right? In 1920, it's a little bit lower, right? And so people who can't read or don't read very well, suddenly they can get the news too, right? They can know about things that everyone else knows about, right? So it's kind of it's an equalizer, right? People can gain access to information even if they can't read it, right? So again, yeah, radio is huge, right? It's the internet of the 1920s, right? Where it connects everybody together in invisible waves, right? That you can listen to anywhere you are. Right? Were there any other communication technologies? I don't think so. We saw a few kind of interesting historical things, right? The building of the Chrysler Building, which you see in basically anything, in any movie or television show that takes place in New York, you'll see the Chrysler Building, right? If you like Spider-Man, you'll know that Spider-Man usually likes to sit on one of the eagles of the Chrysler Building. You see that a lot. Empire State Building we saw, unfortunately, built and then empty because nobody had any money to rent offices in it. Whoops. And that kind of brings us to the stock market crash, right? And I think we read about that the other day in class, but what do you know about that whole kind of situation? Let's talk about that. What? Yeah. Right.
With like no new ideas, and then it kind of stockpiled, and there's too many of them, and then they started selling them.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them.
Yeah.
Trying to sell all of them out, and then that resulted in like stocks going down by a lot since they're selling it all out.
Yeah. Let's talk about two things there. So, number one, when you buy stocks, if you go on the market and you buy a stock, what are you buying? Yeah, what do you think, Regina? What are you buying when you buy a stock on the market?
It's like you're buying a share.
Yeah, you're buying a share. You're buying a little piece of the company, right? So companies, if I own a company that makes travel mugs, Mike's Travel Mugs Incorporated, it's my company, I start it up. And usually what I do is, let's say I need money, right? So because I can only manufacture 1,000 of these a year, they're very popular and I want to make more. So I need to build a factory to do it, but I need millions of dollars and I don't have it. So what do? I give up parts of my company, right? I put 20% of my company on the market, people buy shares of it, and then I can take that money and use it to build my factory, right? So you can kind of sell off little pieces of your company in order to raise capital, right? So that you can build out your company and take it to the next level, right? Maybe it's research and design, maybe you need a new factory, whatever, right? If you need to raise money, you sell off part of your company. And that's what people are doing, right? They're buying shares in people's companies. And like Ben mentioned, the other thing that's happening is that yeah, there's lots of goods being produced, right? And we saw radios and washing machines and cars and all that stuff. But yeah, one of the problems they run into is they're kind of just building and building and making money, but how many vacuum cleaners do you need in your house? Do you think? One?
At most two.
Does anyone have two?
At most two.
At
because,
most two?
Well, nowadays the vacuum cleaners are kind of like, the batteries in there that you charge it.
Right.
So some people, they might just get two, so if they have a big house, they can
Yeah.
switch it to battery.
Right, those small portable Dyson ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1920, most people would just have one,
Yeah. 'cause
right?
It's wall plug.
Yeah, right. So how many vacuum cleaners can you buy, right? If you buy a washing machine, how many washing machines do you need in your house? Just one, right? So that's kind of the problem, is that once people kind of buy something, they don't really need another one for a long time. And unlike today, these things are built well, right? Like the washing machine that we saw in the video there, the green one, I used a similar one when I worked at Mr. Lube, and that was in the 1990s. So that washing machine that I was using was probably 40 or 50 years old. And I doubt any washing machine you buy today will last 40 or 50 years. I think if it lasts 10, you'll be lucky. Very lucky. So yeah, these things are built to last. And again, once people have one, they don't need a second one, right? Most households don't have two cars. Are you kidding? Right? Two radios? What are you, insane? Two stoves, two vacuum cleaners? What for, right? And so, again, these things sell like crazy, but then, once everybody has one, the sales start to kind of level out, and then they start to drop, right? Because everyone who wants one and can afford one has already bought one. And they don't need another one. And so sales start to decline, right? And so if I'm running my travel mug company and sales start to decline, right? And maybe there's a bunch of mugs in my warehouse that I can't really sell right now, what am I going to do to sort of preserve my business? Right? I'm going to try and sell my inventory. What about my manufacturing operation? Or slow it down, right? I used to be making 300 of these a week, but I can't sell the ones in my warehouse. So we're going to slow it down, and we're going to make, 150 a week, right? What's that going to mean for my staff, for my workers? They're going to get paid less, right? I'm going to have to lay some of them off. Maybe I have to put them on a shorter work week, maybe on a 4-day work week. I'm going to slow it all down, right? Because again, I can't sell what I have. But of course, that's kind of a problem too, because those people that work for me, if they get laid off, or if I only schedule them 4 days a week, do they have extra money to buy stuff like this? No, they don't, right? They have to cut back as well, right? My workers are going home and saying to their husbands or wives or whatever, gee, honey, you know how we were going to buy that new vacuum cleaner? Well, I don't think we can now because, I'm only working 4 days a week. We're going to have to cut back a bit, right? And so they don't spend their money on the stuff in inventory, and the inventory continues to pile up, right? If that happens to me, I'm going to let go of more of my staff, right? And so things are kind of starting to slow down on the manufacturing end, right? Because they've produced too much, people have bought all they're going to buy, and then when their jobs start getting cut, then they're buying even less, right? The other thing that's happening, oh good, we do have time for this, although it's going to be quick, is that a lot of those stocks are bought on margin. You know what that means?
They borrow money from the bank.
Yeah, they borrow money from the bank to invest. dangerous, right? Because all of these people investing in the stock market think that the market is just going up and up and up and up, which is true, right? The 20s are all about that. Things are just going through the roof, right? And so they decide, okay, I'm going to borrow $10,000 from the bank. I'm going to invest it all. I'm going to make $30,000 in a couple of years. Then I'll sell my stock. I'll pay back the bank, and I'll have a cool 20 grand, right? $20,000 for doing nothing at all, right? And again, it's a good plan as long as things start going up, right? But as sales start to flatten, people start to call back their loans, right? Banks are like, nope, we need money, right? Our clients are withdrawing money because they don't have any. We need that money back. And so people's loans are called in. But unfortunately, people don't have the money to pay it, right? They said that 80% of consumer goods are bought on credit, right? It's bought with imaginary money. It's bought with future money, right? And so when the bank starts to says, okay, we're calling your loan, we need that money back now, people are like, I don't have that money, right? And so people start selling their stocks, right? So that they can pay the bank back. But the more people sell, what happens to the price? Yeah, the price is going down, right? Suddenly everyone starts to panic, right? I start to panic too because I was trying to make $30,000, right? I borrowed from the bank 10,000. My stocks were worth 15, but now they're going down, right? 14, 13, 12, 11. Oh crap. If I don't sell my stuff right away, I won't be able to pay the bank back, right? And so people start to sell, and some people are lucky and they manage to, but then nobody's really buying because everybody's in the same situation. And so the price is going down, right? 8, 7, 6, 5. Oh shoot, not shoot, a stronger word than that. But oh shoot, now I can't sell my stocks and I don't have enough to pay the bank, right? I owe the bank 10,000. My stocks are worth 3, right? And before you know it, everything collapses. Everybody's trying to sell for whatever they can. Nobody's buying. And all of that money that was kind of imaginary money, it's all gone, right? People have money in the bank, right? They have money in their savings. That money's all gone because the bank can't get it back, right? The money people deposited in their savings accounts, the bank took it and loaned it, right? To make interest, to make a profit. But now the bank can't get it back. And so when people go to the bank to withdraw their money, the bank's like, sorry, we don't have any money. Which again is weird because our banks are so big now that doesn't really happen. But at the time, banks were very decentralized and there was a lot of small ones. And so, yeah, people panicked. They're like, oh, my husband just lost his job at the travel mug factory. Now we need money to buy food and to pay our rent. I'm going to the bank to withdraw our money. And you get to the bank and it's like, sorry, the bank is closed because the bank is out of money. Because they can't recall their loans because nobody can pay them back, right? So it's all like kind of it's a house of cards, right? Everything is carefully balanced, but it's very fragile, right? And it's based on a lot of assumptions, right? The assumption that everything will continue to go up and up. But when it doesn't, people need their money back and that money's not there, right? Everybody is betting on the future, right? Here's the money I will have, but they don't. And if everyone wants their money back or needs it immediately, the whole thing falls apart, right? And that's exactly what happens. Their economy goes unregulated, up and up and up and up. Things start to level out. People start to get laid off. They start to spend less. People start to sell their stocks. It triggers a slide, and then the next thing you know, everyone is panicking, trying to sell off their investments, right? And before you know it, everything has crashed, right? And it's brutal, right? There's people like on the day of the stock market crash, there's people like jumping out of windows in New York City because they're ruined, right? They owe the bank more money than they can possibly pay. They've promised their investors money that they now don't have, and yeah, they're absolutely ruined, right? There's regular people who have been, putting their money in their little savings account every week, for a rainy day, and it's gone, right? The money is just gone, and there's nothing anyone can do about it, right? And so, yeah, it's pretty tragic, right? And again, unfortunately, it comes on the heels of such an increase in wealth and quality of living, and just it's such an exciting time, and then it's just right. And for that reason, I think the crash and the sort of depression that comes afterwards in some ways is much worse for the United States, because other countries don't get that boom, right? They're trying to rebuild their economies after the war, and then it kind of, and it's just not as far of a drop. But the Americans are flying high for almost a decade, and then it all comes crashing down, right? And it's brutal, right? It's really brutal.
I think in the United States we're like more focused on domestic economy rather than like foreign trade and all that during that time. So
Yep.
kind of way worse than the countries over there.
Yeah, very, very much so,
Yeah.
right? They were very focused on what they were doing, and who could blame them, because it was really working well, right? They really had a great decade, right? Until
But then they got kind of like isolated themselves from the world.
A little-
Where Europe can help each other out, but the United States can't.
yeah, well, and the United States did have some, connection. They were still trading with Europe. They loaned a lot of money to European nations to help them rebuild, and charged interest on it. So they actually made money off the sort of reconstruction of Europe. But yeah, they were off kind of doing their own thing and having wild success, and then, disaster, right? Okay, good people, that is all we have for today. We are out of time. Pack it up, have a good weekend, rest up, try to get some sun and some fresh air this weekend if you can. It's good for your health. And and we'll see you Monday, okay? Okay, that's it.